To another reading lesson with Miss Meadows. We are wrapping up our biography unit today, which means that we are going to read a story that we read earlier this week. You're going to get to hear a little bit of a revisit from Miss Meadows. But to kickstart things, I'm going to talk about a little bit of a new anchor chart. This is one we've seen before and talked about before, but a new one to go along with our story today, which is text features. So authors choose text and graphic features to help explain ideas or to help readers to locate information. So for example, diagrams are pictures with labels that tell what each part is. That is one example of a text feature. So for example, a roof, a window, or a door is it's labeling the parts of this picture. That's a diagram. It's a picture with labels to show you which each part is. Then it also says another example of a text feature is that text can be in different colors. The colors can mean something or they can just be for fun. So we might put the color hot in red or the word cold in blue, and it could have meaning, but it could also just be for fun to make it look pretty. And then also curved text can wrap around the art and make reading more fun. So here we have curved text that's wrapping around those octopus tentacles. This is just to make reading fun and make it look pretty and be cool. So that is a couple examples of some text features that you might see in our story today. I'm going to cut to old Miss Meadows, and she's going to read a story to you that we read earlier this week. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you have fun relearning about biographies, and I will see you later. Have fun, friends! To another reading lesson with Miss Meadows. We are up on a new anchor chart today. So last week we were learning about informational texts, and the week before that we were learning about narrative nonfiction. This week we are going to start learning about biographies. So a biography tells about the life of a real person. So we have some examples in these little bubbles on the outside, like Martin Luther King Jr., who we learned about earlier this week, or Helen Keller. Abraham Lincoln is one of our presidents. Amelia Earhart, we're going to be learning about in just a couple minutes. Rosa Parks and George Washington was our first president of the United States. So these are all examples of people who could have biographies written about them. Biographies are usually about famous or important people, but could also be about just regular, normal people too. So things that a biographies exist. They tell why the person is important, events from the person's life, so things that happen and things that make them special or important, information about where the person lived, worked, or traveled, and then ways that the person has made a difference in their world, in their community, things like that. So the different things we're looking for in a biography are that they would have photos or artwork that show the person. So either artwork that depicts that person or actual photos of that person. It would have the events in order from earliest to latest. So it would have probably starting from when they were a kid to when they were a grown-up, and then a timeline that shows the order of events. So for example, they were born, they started school, and then they learned how to ride a bike could be an example of a biography of one of you. So a biography really is the story of a real person. If it's the story of a pretend person or a character, that wouldn't be a biography. It would just be a story. For it to be a biography, it has to be about a real, live, actual person. So the story that we are going to be reading about today, whoops, disappeared, is a story we read earlier in the school year. It's called I Am Amelia Earhart. You might remember this. It's by Brad Meltzer, is our author, or the person who writes the words, and it's illustrated by Christopher Eliopoulos, who is the person who draws the pictures. Now, if you remember, Amelia Earhart was the person we read about who was one of the first women to fly a plane. So this is a biography because it tells the story of Amelia Earhart and how she started when she was just a kid and then goes all the way to when she was a grown-up. So we're going to do a reread of this. I hope you enjoy it. I hope it makes you smile. Let's get going. I Am Amelia Earhart by Brad Meltzer. I am Amelia Earhart. When I was little, people told me that girls should wear dresses and play with dolls. They said we shouldn't have unladylike adventures. I didn't agree. In fact, when I was 7 years old, my sister and I decided to build our own roller coaster in our backyard. We placed 2 planks of wood up against the side of our tool shed. This one says, "Grandma's not gonna like this." The cab was a wooden packing box with roller skate wheels attached to the bottom. We greased the wood with lard so we'd move super fast. Amelia, are you sure this is a good idea? This isn't a good idea. It's the best idea. Of course, I got to ride first. This was my moment. Here we go in 3, 2. I still remember the wind in my face. My stomach seemed to sink. I was flying. The crash was loud and noisy and messy. It certainly wasn't ladylike, but it was awesome. Amelia Earhart, take this apart this instant. That was awesome. It wasn't the last time I would fly. As I got older, I went to many air shows. When I was 23 years old, but still a kid at heart, my dad took me to meet Frank Hawks, a man who would eventually set many of his own flight records. You ready? I'm ready. For $10, Hawks agreed to take me on my very first flight. For 10 minutes, we flew through the sky and out over the Pacific Ocean. By the time I was 200 or 300 feet off the ground, I knew one thing: I had to fly. To save for my flying lessons, I worked as a truck driver, which wasn't ladylike either. A stenographer, which is a fancy schmancy word for someone who writes down what people say snook. 6 months after I learned to fly, I bought a bright yellow used biplane that I named Canary. Canary is a cool name for a plane, right? And this is my instructor, a woman named Netta Snook. Yes, that's her real name. But here's my secret. I wasn't a natural. I wasn't the best pilot. I just worked harder than anyone else. That's enough flying for today. No, I can do better. One more. Most important, like that day on the roller coaster, I dared to do what so many said couldn't be done. A girl flying across the Atlantic? Amelia, you sure this is a good idea? This isn't a good idea. It's the best idea. I became the first woman to fly across the Atlantic Ocean, and then the first person to fly by myself across the Atlantic. Back then, people took boats to get to Europe, sailing for weeks. Planes were still a new thing. In fact, on the day I took off, one magazine ran an article that said women would never be able to fly that far. But I did. To do it, I had to fly for 14 hours and 56 minutes with no rest, no break. Sometimes the sun was so blinding I could barely see where I was going. In the process, I also broke the record for crossing the ocean in the shortest amount of time, doing it faster than any man or woman ever. Then I broke an altitude record, which is just a fancy schmancy way of saying I went higher than anyone else. And how high did I go? About 12 Empire State Buildings straight up, at a time when no woman had ever gone that high. In October of 1922, I broke the women's altitude record by rising to 14,000 feet. And in July of 1930, I set a speed record of over 181 miles per hour. In my life, I took many flights. Every single time, there was someone who said that I wouldn't be able to do it. Never let anyone stop you. Whatever your dream is, chase it. Work hard for it. You will find it. It is the best lesson I can give you. I am Amelia Earhart. I know no bounds, and I hope you'll remember that the greatest flight you'll ever take is the one no one has tried before. And this is a real photo of Amelia Earhart that says a quote from her, which is something she actually said. Never interrupt someone doing what you said couldn't be done. Amelia Earhart. So that is a biography that tells us about Amelia Earhart because it told actual facts from her life, real things that she accomplished. It happened, we'll look at our anchor chart. We had photos or artwork that showed the person. We had both artwork of Amelia Earhart and a real photo of her at the end. We had the events in order from earliest to latest. So we had her first ever time she started flying to the very last things that she did. And then a timeline that shows the order of events. So we had that timeline as we were reading. We learned why she's important, that she was the first woman to ever fly a plane. We learned events from her life about how she was not the greatest pilot at first, but she got so much better, that she was taking pictures of people and working other jobs before she was flying. We learned information about how she worked or traveled, where she flew, and why she made a difference, because she showed other women that they could also be pilots. So that was a perfect example of a biography. What a great way to kick off our new biography week. I'm so excited for you now to be able to go unlock your gem choices. So remember, you can do ruby, emerald, sapphire, or that diamond one if you're interested, to fill out the planning sheet and record a video. I hope you enjoyed this story. I hope you have fun with your gem worksheets after this, and I will see you for another lesson tomorrow. Bye, friends.